Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Diaspora Scholar Application walkthrough for the Carnegie African Diaspora Fellowship Program. My name is Randy Butler. I'm a program specialist with foundation programs at the Institute of International Education. I'm joined today by my colleague, Chris Carson, and he will be assisting with our Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. You may recognize his name if you've been emailing us. Chris, do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris, and I will be helping answer any questions you have during this presentation. And I'll also be doing a lot of the advising and application inquiry advising throughout the application process. And so if you email us at africandiaspora@iie.org, I'll be responding to your questions. And so I look forward to speaking with you, both answering your questions here and via email.
Great, thanks, Chris. Okay, well, we will go ahead and get started. Move to the next slide. A program overview. What is the Carnegie African Diaspora Fellowship Program, also known as the CADFP? If you're unfamiliar with the program, it is a scholar fellowship program for educational projects at higher education institutions in Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, and Uganda. Member universities of the African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA, and partner institutions of the Consortium for Advanced Research Training in Africa, CARTA, are also eligible to apply for the program. The program is offered by the Institute of International Education, also known as IIE. That is where Chris and I work. The program is funded by a grant from Carnegie Corporation of New York, and over 705 fellowships have been awarded since the program's inception in 2013. Eligible host institutions can propose a 14 to 90-day project in one or more of the following areas: innovations in curriculum co-development, new approaches and methods to graduate training and mentoring, and impactful research collaboration and capacity strengthening. For projects that are proposing innovations in curriculum co-development, the project request should outline activities in curriculum co-development that are focusing on innovative and collaborative approaches to designing and implementing new courses and curriculum. Fellowships that assist host institutions in developing and strengthening online instructional capacities are highly encouraged. Project requests that include curriculum development proposals must provide the actual or the anticipated course titles and the number of courses to be evaluated and developed, as well as how the host institution plans to staff teaching of the new curricula. For projects that are proposing new approaches and methods to graduate mentoring and training, the project requests should identify new approaches and methods that will enhance graduate students' technical and research skills. Projects in graduate student teaching and mentoring need to indicate the number and type of graduate students who will be taught and or mentored, and their name if possible, as well as the nature of the relationships, such as the course instruction, thesis dissertation advising, dissertation committee, and so on. For projects proposing impactful research collaboration and capacity strengthening, the project request should demonstrate long-term impact and strengthening of host faculty, technical and research skills. Collaborative research proposals should include anticipated publication titles, academic journals for publication where applicable. And please remember that project requests must be submitted by the host institution. These are a few examples of project requests that have been submitted. You can also go to our website at iie.org/African Diaspora and navigate to the Selected Projects tab to view a list of all of the selected projects over the years of the program. The eligibility requirements for the program, there's different eligibility requirements, whether you are a host institution or a diaspora scholar. This webinar is specifically directed towards diaspora scholar applicants. We did have an application walkthrough last week for potential host institutions. That recording is on our YouTube channel. You are welcome to stay in this presentation if you are a potential host institution, but please keep in mind this presentation is geared towards scholar applicants. You should be aware, even if you are a scholar applicant, that the host institution must hold accreditation through a national higher education accreditation agency in Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania, and Uganda. Public and private institutions may apply. And member institutions of Arua and Carta are also eligible to apply. Now, for diaspora scholars, the eligibility requirements are the applicant must be an African-born scholar living in the US or Canada. They must hold a terminal degree, and they have to currently hold an academic title at an accredited university or college in the United States or Canada. The application process. The application is open right now for project requests. We do accept scholar applications on a rolling basis year-round, but to be matched with a project request, which is the step that allows you to actually be awarded the fellowship, you need to be matched with a project request during the open application period, which is right now until September 18th, 2024. It closes at 11:59 p.m. I'll give some more information on this entire process as we move forward, but please keep that deadline in mind. So we do have a two-sided application process. The first is a project request has to be completed by a potential host institution. That host institution has to meet the program's eligibility requirements. And then a scholar application also has to be completed by a diaspora scholar who meets the eligibility requirements. To be matched with a project request, how does the scholar get matched with the project request? You can either, as a scholar, be matched directly with the project request. So the potential host institution would name you, the scholar, in their project request. They would say, we want to bring Joe Scholar from Stanford to our institution to help us with this project. So they would mention you in their application. There's a space for them to enter your name. And then when you fill out your scholar application, you could also talk about the project that you hope to go and work on at the host institution. If you don't already have a relationship with a host institution, you can submit your diaspora scholar application, and you would be placed on our scholar roster. Every cycle, we do receive a number of project requests that are not requesting a specific scholar. And so for those, we do then look at our roster and we look for scholars who have the specific expertise that's needed for that project. If you meet that expertise, potentially, we would then reach out to you and see if there's a match that can be made with a potential host. So I'm going to go through the application process now, and I'm going to switch over to our application portal. I do want to show that to reach our application, which does look like this, I'm going to go onto a live web page here. This is our website, iit.org/African Diaspora. You would come to the website, you would go to how to apply, and then this link here is what you would click on to open the application. So you would click this. If you have never logged into the system before, you would need to click applicant registration. If you're a if you're a diaspora scholar, you would select diaspora scholar. If you're a host, you would select host. So I have another browser open. Here it is. So I'm going to log in to my scholar application. And so once you log in, it will look like this. You can see your deadline. It's a rolling deadline. But if you do want to be matched with a project request, you do need to have your application submitted by the September 18th deadline. Here you can see the status bar. You can see, okay, I'm still in progress. I have not submitted my application. And here's some navigation on the side, but the most important navigation really pops up once you open your scholar application. So you'll click Scholar Application. We do have guidelines, so if you need to refamiliarize yourself with the guidelines for submitting the Diaspora Scholar application, you would click there. Now on the guidelines, we have instructions over here on the left as well. It provides you step-by-step instructions on how to fill out the application, how to save and submit your information, how to navigate, as well as just directing you back to our program website, application guidelines, and our contact here at the bottom. We have a frequently asked questions section within the application, as well as on our website, which I will show again when I'm done doing this application walkthrough. We'll then open and get to the actual application piece, where you'll enter all your information, your name, email, the best email for you to be contacted about your application, your personal information, address, all of this. This is just for us to be able to know who you are. You'll enter in your current position, what university or college where you're employed, department, your title, the start date, field of study. This part right here, subfields, area of expertise, this is really important for you to be as thorough as possible about what your different areas of expertise are, other subfields that you have experience in. Particularly if you are submitting your application to be on our roster and you're not directly matched with an institution and you just want to be considered off of our open roster, we need this area to be filled in as completely as possible, so that way we can see if you have the expertise that's needed for projects that are looking for a scholar. Your current employment address will be next, and you can move to the next page. Your education information. So a terminal degree is required to be eligible as a Diaspora Scholar applicant. You would enter that data here, where you received your terminal degree, the department, the degree type, when you attended that program. Administrative service. So here are some other fields that are really critical to be as thorough as possible. Your description of administrative service roles, such as service on committees and the number of graduate students you've mentored. That would be particularly important if you are applying to be considered for a project that involves mentoring of graduate students. This is where you would want to describe your experience already doing that. Other significant accomplishments. If there are relevant sections of your CV that you want to highlight further, you can place those descriptions here under leadership roles and awards. And then you'll scroll down to fill in your personal statements. So contributions, this is where you can discuss further contributions that you could make to curriculum co-development, research collaboration, and or graduate student mentoring and training. If you are working with a potential host institution and you're in touch with them during the project request process, you know that they are naming you in their project request. This is where you could specifically talk about that I, the scholar, can be a big help with this particular project at X school in Kenya because I have this experience in curriculum co-development, and this is the curriculum co-development that they're wanting to do. If you are not working directly with an institution during the application process and you are wanting to be included on the roster, you could discuss past contributions to these areas, past projects you've worked on at your home institution, or if you are an alumni of the program, you could also reference that here, or also thoughts on how you could contribute to these areas based on experience you have. You also need to write about your motivation for applying, your professional and personal reasons for applying for the program. And potential impact, you have a lot of words to write here. You can, if you'll notice, previous sections have a 200 to 250 word limit. You have a lot more space to write for potential impact. So try to use your whole space, be as thorough as possible, as detailed as possible, and think and describe how this experience would provide potential immediate and longer term impact, impact on you, as well as impact on your home institution, and impact on the host institution, as well as future collaborations that could arise from your participation, the relationship built, institutional linkages, and potential future innovations. So this is where you can be as thorough as possible. You have about twice as much space as you do in some of the previous sections. So really use all of that space. Here's where you would indicate if you've previously received a CADFP fellowship. The maximum lifetime allowed is 2 fellowships. So if you've received the CADFP once, you are allowed to receive it again. So you would indicate that yes or no. If it is yes, please be aware that you do have to submit a copy of your fellowship report with your application. The next section is where you would request your letter of recommendation. A letter of recommendation is required to be submitted by an administrator at the level of dean or higher from your current institution. So if you currently are a faculty member at Harvard, it would need to be your dean or higher at Harvard. It would not be your dean. It would not be the dean or administrator at the potential host institution in Nigeria. It needs to be your dean or higher at your home institution in the United States or Canada. That letter must be submitted by September 18th, the deadline. It needs to be submitted by 11:59 p.m. Eastern. If you have an old letter of recommendation, you can log in and see if you already have one in the system. If your letter is more than 3 years old, you need to have a new one submitted. And you should also check if the letter that you have in the system is the dean who wrote that letter still the dean of at your school. If it's not, you need to request a new one. You would do that by clicking request letter. You would fill in the information of who you're requesting the letter from, your dean or your vice president. You would fill all that in. You would then click send email to recommender, and this would trigger a message from our system to go to the email address that you put in here for your dean or president or whoever's getting this request. We recommend that you do give them a heads up and let them know that you're applying. They're not surprised. They know what this is. They know what's required. You can then track the status of that recommendation here. Again, we have to have that letter of recommendation in the portal by the deadline in order for your application to be considered complete. The final piece of your application is there are several documents that need to be included with your application. So you need to upload a current CV. Please ensure that it's no longer than 8 pages. A 20-page CV, don't upload that. Please review it, make it as concise as you can, and upload your CV. We also need a copy of the data page of your passport. So that's the page with your photo, and it says country of birth, it says country of citizenship, has that data on there, because if you'll remember, an eligibility requirement for a diaspora scholar is you have to be African born. So this is where we verify that information. If you have already received a CADFP fellowship in the past, you also need to submit your fellowship report in this document section. After you upload everything here, you'll see, and you can upload them as PDFs, doc files, text files. You'll see that there's a maximum size of 3 megabytes. You'll upload your files, you'll click continue. And then this is a review page where you can check and see everything you've filled in. It will tell you what's missing. And then once this is all complete, you'll have the ability to actually submit the application. Do want to show as you go through the application process, and I'm back here now on our program website. I'm out of the application portal. I'm back on the website. There's a very thorough, when you click on how to apply, we have a very thorough FAQ on the actual website that you can read through and have probably most of your questions answered by reading through the FAQ. They're frequently asked questions. If you have a question that's not answered by reading through the FAQ, or by reading through this tab here for African-born diaspora scholars, you can read through this, or if your question is unanswered by any of these tabs, review process, types of fellowships, please go ahead and contact us at africandiaspora@iie.org. We're always, happy to connect with you. We're going to respond to your messages, but also please take advantage of the rich resources that we have on our website to help you help yourself through the application process. So now I'll go back to my slides. So after you have submitted your application, the next piece to consider is our review process. You submit your project request, the scholar application together. If you're matched with a project request, that then goes through a technical review process where we check the eligibility of both applications. If it passes the technical review, it then goes to a discipline review. It's reviewed by a committee of peer reviewers who are specialists in those disciplines that your project is, that you are focused in. If it passes the discipline review, you'll receive a notice that you've moved forward to the advisory council review. That meeting will take place in November, where the advisory council reviews all of the finalist applications. And then we anticipate notifying the selected recipients by the very end of November of 2024. The review criteria. This is listed on our website. So you can also look at that at any time, but I'll just review it briefly here. In our review, we look at the eligibility. The review committees will review the quality of the proposed project, the evidence of the mutual benefit for host institution and scholar in the proposed project, the appropriateness of the time proposed for the project visit. So, for example, if you're proposing curriculum development, if your project request is about curriculum development and you're proposing that you go over there to your host institution to help develop the curriculum, can the curriculum be developed in 14 days? Maybe not. So that will be considered. Is the length of time and the time of year appropriate for that project that's going to be carried out? The fit and quality of the proposed scholar match. If you are a biology expert, you're a faculty member in biology, and you're submitting an application to go and work on a statistics project, does that make sense? Maybe it does, but you need to make the case for why it does. Perhaps it has something to do with biology statistics, but it has to be very clear so that way the review committee can see that you are the best match for that particular project. The potential for impact. There's the field in the applications to talk about that potential for impact. So that is considered, and that's why you want to take full advantage of that space to describe the potential for impact. The host institution cost share. This is really a place for the host institution to show their commitment to this project, but this is considered in the review. And then the letters of support and recommendation are also taken into consideration during that review. Program benefits. If you are selected as a Diaspora Fellow, the fellowship provides a daily stipend. It pays for the visa costs. There's a limited health insurance that it pays for, and it also pays for the round-trip international airfare, as well as ground transportation costs to and from home here in the United States or Canada and your airport locally. There are 5 different fellowship types, and I'll explain these in more detail in the following slides. The multi-institutional fellowship, this is where 2 institutions would submit a single project request. This is, we do see these each cycle, but you may, if you are participating in a project request that is between 2 institutions, just be aware that both institutions need to have letters of support that they submit in the project request. The institutions can be in different countries, and we do allow collaborations between universities and research organizations. If you are interested in participating in a multi-institutional project, you do need to contact our staff prior to completing the application process. A cohort fellowship. There is a cohort fellowship which provides for funding of a group of scholars, so 2 or more scholars. Each scholar in the cohort needs to submit a Diaspora Scholar Application as well as a letter of recommendation from their home institution. Scholars can be in the same fields of study, but we do recommend that they have different subfields of expertise, and scholars in a cohort can be from different home institutions. If you are interested in participating in a multi-institutional project, please contact our staff at africandiaspora@iie.org prior to submitting your application. A flexible fellowship. This is where a scholar makes 2 separate visits to a host institution to work on a project. It is the project request responsibility to include a clear justification for the flexible model. Each visit of the flexible fellowship should be at least 14 days. The combined length of both visits should not exceed 90 days. And be aware that the second round trip ticket must be funded by either the scholar's home institution or the host institution that submitted the project request. So the fellowship will not pay for 2 round trip flights, it will only pay for the first round trip flight. And the letter of support from the home institution, as well as the letter of recommendation, should note that the project will be conducted over 2 visits. There's also the alumni fellowship. If you are an alumni, if you have received this fellowship before, this is the fellowship you would be awarded if you're selected. Alumni can choose, you can choose to collaborate with a previous host or a new institution. And please remember that your application must include your 1 to 2 page fellowship report. Scholars are not required to submit a new application. If you do want to go in and update your old application, if you've had an application in the system for the past 5 years, please contact us. We can reopen your application for you, and then you can go back in, provide updates. Maybe you've received a new grant you want to talk about, you've developed a new course that you want to talk about on your application. You can do that. You just need to have us reopen your application for you. There's also supplemental funds that are available. If a project request is matched with a scholar application, they can apply for supplemental funds. And those funds can be used for costs associated with field work, workshops, publications, and other items. And all funds must have a direct connection to the outcomes that are listed in the project request. There are knowledge production grants and workshop funds. The knowledge production grants cover research and publication costs, such as field visits or software and books. These grants do not fund movable equipment, such as laptops or cameras. The workshop funds cover costs related to hosting a workshop up to a maximum of $1,500. And the knowledge production grant also has a maximum of $1,500. The timeline. So we do have the application open right now for project requests. So again, if you are wanting to be matched with a project request, you need to have all of your materials in by this deadline. If you're working with a potential host institution, they need to have their project request in by this deadline. Selection decisions will be announced in late November 2024, and the selected projects can begin as early as January 6th. So if you are selected, you could travel January 6th, 2025 to go work on your project. The project needs to be completed by November 30th, 2025. So next steps, go to our website, click on how to apply, start from there. Make sure you download and review the project request guidelines if you're a potential host. But also it's helpful to be knowledgeable about the project request guidelines, especially if you're working with a first-time host applicant. That way as you work with them, you can be aware of what they're submitting. The scholar application guidelines are also there on the website. And of course, those are going to be the most important for you if you are a scholar applicant. You can follow the link to the application portal. Everything must be submitted online. Do not email us your CV. Do not email us your passport page. Please do not download and email the project application or the scholar application and email it to us. Everything must be submitted through the portal. And again, utilize the FAQ tab in the application and within our website. Contact us. There's our email address. It's africandiaspora@iie.org. I will say that we have an out of office or an auto reply message. We have an auto reply message that you will get when you email our box, and it will provide you with links to useful resources that you can refer to while we work on a response to you. It can take up to 24 hours for us to respond to you, but you can email us there. There's our website, iie.org/African Diaspora. We also have a Facebook and a LinkedIn page where we post links to resources, program announcements, deadline reminders, links to recordings and other resources for you. So please look for us there on Facebook and LinkedIn if you'd like to connect there. At this time, I'm going to let everyone, if you haven't typed in a question, this is a great time to submit a question for us. We have about 30 minutes to address questions. Chris and I are here on the call, ready to address your questions. So go ahead and type your questions into the box. And I'll just give you a few minutes to type those in if you haven't already, and then we'll start addressing them. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with responding to these questions. Chris, I'm going to ask if you can, jump in here. If you want to turn on your camera, you can. But here's a really good first question, especially, as scholars are thinking about where are they going to stay when they go. We have a question about who is responsible for the accommodation cost of the scholar.
Yeah, this is a really great question, and there are two ways we usually approach this one, or I guess you could say three ways we usually approach this one. We prefer for the host institution to offer a cost share. So we prefer for the host institution to pay for some of the costs of the visiting diaspora fellow. And one of the ways that they can do this is by providing accommodation for the fellow. And so sometimes the host institution will offer to provide full accommodation. Many host institutions have their own guest houses or hotels on the university premises, which is a convenient way for them to provide accommodation for visiting scholars. Sometimes a host institution can share this cost share and say that the host institution can provide partial funds to cover accommodation. But we also understand if the host institution is on a very tight budget and they're not able to provide any additional funds, they are not required to. So if this is the case, the CADFP program would provide additional funding for the price of accommodation.
Thanks, Chris. And I saw another question that I want to just read out in case folks aren't looking at the answered tab. The daily stipend does cover weekends and holidays as well. That was a question, if it covers weekends. So yes, it does. Weekends and holidays are covered within that stipend. Are there sample successful applications to look at? No, we don't have samples applications to look at, but what you can do is go to the website, which I'll pull up here. If you go to the program website and you go to selected projects, you can download a list of all selected projects from the history of the program. This doesn't let you see the full application, but you can see the data. You can see the name of the project that they worked on, the period of time, who was involved. So you can utilize that resource, but we don't have full applications available for you to read and look at. But you can also contact us for advising support if you are concerned about submitting a successful application, and we're available to provide that type of advising. There's a question here: who should write the letter of support from the host institution? Does their position matter? So there's two letters, right? There's the letter of recommendation that is from the home institution, that is from the scholars institution, must be written by a dean or higher. And then from the host institution in the host country, the letter of support must also be written by a dean or higher. So their position does matter. They have to have the position of a dean or higher. If you are not sure whether someone's position is an eligible position to submit their letter, you can go ahead and email us and tell us who they are, what their position is, what their title is, and we can advise you on that.
So we
Yeah,
have a
Chris?
couple of questions that I answered in the chat that I just want to reiterate for people who haven't been reading through the Q&A as it comes up. One thing that was asked is about providing funding to the host institution. And so CADFP doesn't provide any funds directly to the host institution. And so the visiting scholar is the person providing a service to the host institution and helping them develop a new curriculum or helping them mentor their students. And so that is the benefit of the host institution that the host receives. And so when we provide the stipend, we provide this money directly to the visiting scholar. We also had a question about whether you must be an alumni or affiliated with a university in order to do a fellowship there. And no prior experience in the host country is required. And so if you were born in Burkina Faso, but you moved to Florida when you were very little, and you don't have any experience in Africa, you're still welcome to apply and to do a fellowship in South Africa or Nigeria or one of the eligible countries. The fellowship must take place in one of the eligible countries or a member of ARUA or CARTA, but you don't need to be specifically from that country.
Thanks, Chris. And on the topic of payments for the host institution, I mean, we know that the stipend is paid directly to the scholar. What about, we talked about supplemental funds. Can you provide some clarity on that?
Yeah, so supplemental funds are funding that can help pay for things at the host institution. And this is a reimbursement that is provided to the diaspora scholar. And so both the host and the scholar might, or the host and the scholar would submit a joint application for supplemental funds. The application needs to be signed by both of those people. And if they are approved for supplemental funds, the host or the scholar can spend their own money purchasing food for a conference, purchasing equipment to support a project, and then we will reimburse the diaspora scholar for this. So we recommend that the diaspora scholar purchase this out of their own funds. Sometimes if the host fellow needs to do this, the diaspora scholar can reimburse their host before they depart the university. That's kind of the easiest way to do that. But we won't provide any money to the host to do that. So the reimbursement will be made to the diaspora fellow.
Thanks, Chris, for that clarification. Here's a question on can a scholar work with two different host institutions on projects during the 90 days? So if this is a multi-institutional fellowship and these two institutions have submitted one project request together for a collaborative project, that is allowed. But a diaspora scholar can only receive one fellowship per cycle. So you could not be awarded a fellowship to go to institution X in Nigeria and go there for 6 weeks and then come back to the US and then go on another project in South Africa for 2 more weeks. It would need to be one collaborative project between 2 host institutions within this single cycle. I hope that answers that question. Chris, is there anything you want to add to that?
I would just like to reiterate that you should make sure that the 2 institutions are submitting a joint application. If it, like, it would not work if you have 2 institutions each submitting their own application. You would need to have the 2 institutions communicating with each other and sharing their login information so they can both log into the account and both work on the application together.
Yeah. Okay, so someone has already applied and they're already in the system. Do they need to update their CV to add, they do need to update their CV to add new details. How do they do that? You email us at africandiaspora@iie.org. Email us, tell us that you need your scholar application reopened so that way you can go in and update your CV. That's all you need to do. You can take a look at all the different fields within your application, update your CV, any other data, but you just have to email us and then we can reopen your application to allow you to do that.
There's another question that says, do I need a new letter of recommendation if from my dean if the previous letter they wrote has not been up to a year, so it has not been like updated, I guess. And we accept letters of recommendation for diaspora scholar applications that are up to 3 years old. And so if you applied for the program in 2018 and you haven't applied to it since, you'll need to provide us a new letter of recommendation from your dean. But if you just applied in the most recent application cycle, you'll most likely be able to reuse your letter of recommendation from your dean. The only exception to that is if you've changed universities, if you now work for a different university and if you've worked for a new institution for over 6 months, we need a new letter of recommendation from your new dean. Or if your dean has changed, so if the dean that wrote you the letter of recommendation has moved on to a new institution or retired, we need a letter of recommendation from the current dean.
Thanks, Chris. And can you also talk a bit about what needs to be in a dean's recommendation letter to be considered a strong letter of recommendation?
So in a dean's letter of recommendation, this should show that the dean is familiar with your research and really knows the strengths that you bring to the program. So it should talk about your academic capabilities, your leadership positions, and it should just generally be supportive and show that the dean is also okay with you taking time either during the summer or during the school year for you to do this program. We don't want the dean or your staff at your institution to suddenly say that, oh, we don't have time for this professor to take a leave of absence for 3 months. Your letter of recommendation should show that they are supportive of that.
Thanks. So I see a question here saying, do you recommend a host to us for a host institution if that kind of assistance is required by us? So this is a really great question. If you don't already have a relationship with a potential host, you can still apply and submit your scholar application to live on our scholar roster. We always receive project requests that don't already have a scholar lined up. They don't know who they can have come work with them, but they know they want a scholar. Depending on what your expertise is and what expertise is needed for the different projects, there might be a match made. So if we have a project that is looking to develop new medical school curriculum for an institution, and you have experience doing that, you are, a faculty member in that field, you have experience developing some type of medical school curriculum, we'll see that on your CV. We'll see that in your fields of expertise, in your experience. We will then take your information, share it with that project request submitter, and propose you. If they think it's a good fit, they want to work with you, we'll then make an introduction. And then at that time, you'll be introduced to them and you can collaborate together on finalizing the application and submitting your scholar application and their project request for this medical school curriculum project. So that is how that would work if you don't already have a potential host connection in mind. And if an application is successful, yes, your scholar application does stay on the roster to be matched with a host institution in the next round. So you wouldn't need to fill out another application next cycle. Your application would stay there. And then if you have some big, change in your institution, maybe you move from University of California at Berkeley to now you're at University of California, Los Angeles, you can contact us so you can log in and update your information.
One person asked if we can show an example of a dean's recommendation letter. Unfortunately, we can't show any examples as it is like personal information that people have submitted. But there's no real format that they can use. Most deans are pretty familiar with what goes into a recommendation letter. And so as long as it's able to speak to your strengths and really show that the dean supports you, I think your recommendation letter should be sufficient.
Thanks, Chris. There's also a question on what are the scholar's qualification requirements beyond eligibility, right? Because there's the basic eligibility requirements. What other requirements are required? Other qualification? Initially, it would be that you have the expertise required to work on the project, that you have the experience, that you've done this type of work that is being requested for the project request. If it's a graduate student mentoring project, do you have expertise in the field that you would be mentoring graduate students in? Chris, do you have other thoughts on that?
I think that puts it pretty well. I think sometimes within the project request, they're looking for very specific, very specific and niche areas. And so I think one thing that a lot of diaspora scholars struggle with is just if your skills don't necessarily match what's being looked for. That could be one reason why many people do not receive the fellowship. And so, but if there's a university in Nigeria that's looking for somebody who studies like infectious diseases in mosquitoes and like West Nile virus, and that's your area of focus, then you would be a good match for that specific project.
Thanks. There's a couple questions about if a research project involves working with an organization that has a relationship with the host university, do you need a letter of support from that organization as well? So if a organization, so the fellowship is to support the diaspora scholar going to a host institution, which would be a university. If it is a multi-institution fellowship where that host university is formally collaborating with this other organization, and they collaborate on the project request, yes, a letter of support from both the host university and the other host organization would need to be included within the project request application. The university would need to be the one submitting the application, but then they could include the letter of support from the partner organization as well. Is there anything you would add to that instruction, Chris, in this situation where a university is collaborating with an organization?
I think that answers the question pretty well.
Okay.
We have one question about whether the CADFP can fund courses for the diaspora scholar prior to the fellowship. And that is not something that we can provide funding for, unfortunately. So if you need any like preparation courses prior to travel, yeah, that's not something that we can help fund.
Thanks. We've received a couple of questions asking how many applications does the program receive each year, how many people are awarded each year, how many scholars are funded on average. This is not data that we publicly share, though you can, as I showed, you can go to the program website to see a full list of projects that have been selected and funded over the years. You can see if the project had one or more scholars tied with that project. We've awarded over 705 fellowships in the history of the program. So that is the type of statistics that we can provide, but we don't provide application numbers or rates on how many people are awarded each cycle. But I do recommend that you go to the website and navigate to selected projects, and then you can download that full list of selected projects. You can view who the fellows are, the host fellow, institutional affiliations, things like that. We have a few more minutes. If you haven't had a chance to submit your question, you can go ahead and type it in. You can also review the answered tab within the Q&A box on Zoom, because I know Chris has been typing in lots of responses to different questions that have come in. So there may be a question and response that applies to something you're thinking about. Well, as we wrap up, I do want to say that we have had, we recently hosted 2 webinars focused on best practices for applying. There was a best practice for project request webinar that featured a member of our advisory council who reviews the finalist applications, as well as a discipline reviewer. They both presented on best practices for submitting a project request, and they gave their advice for submitting a competitive project request. This recording is posted on our YouTube channel. We'll be sharing it out soon, again, on social media. The recording has been posted, but you can go review there. We also hosted a scholar application best practice webinar about 2 weeks ago that featured 2 presenters who are CADFP alumni and also peer reviewers. So they are part of the first round of reviewing, and they talked about their best practices for submitting a competitive scholar application. This is also on our YouTube channel. So I really encourage you to go and view these resources. They are both full of such great information on what should be included in a competitive application. These presenters talked about what they consider when they are reviewing applications. They discussed, in their view, what makes a competitive application. They discussed common mistakes that they often see when reviewing applications. So I really encourage you to go to the CADFP Facebook page, find the link to that video. You can look up the Carnegie African Diaspora Fellowship Program on YouTube, find those videos. We'll also be sending out links to those videos as well as the recording from this presentation to everyone who registered for this today, so you can view that as well. Oh, we had one last question just come through. I am from Zimbabwe, but work at a South African university. Am I eligible to apply for scholarship application with no fellow? So working at a South African university, you could submit a project request requesting a visiting fellow from the United States or Canada to come and collaborate with you on your project at the South African university. You would not be able to apply as a diaspora fellow, but you can submit a project request provided that your university in South Africa is an eligible institution. Okay, well, I think are at time now. So thank you everyone for all of your questions. Thank you for your attention today. I'm going to put the contact slide up one last time. So you can write those down if you need. Again, the recording from today's presentation will be shared out with everyone who registered, along with the links to our other recordings, but you can also find those at any time on our social media channels. Thank you, Chris, for joining me today to help answer all of these questions. Feel free to email us at any time. Chris and I are standing by on the other end to respond to your messages. And we're, looking forward to assisting you through this process, and hope you reach out with any questions you have.
Thank you so much, everybody. We look forward to answering your questions.
Great. Thank you. Bye.